A present, cool! Wow! Protect the gift that's been given to you. The Nature Conservancy.
That clip, a little brief clip, protect the gift that has been given to you. This world has been given to us. That was a clip that was basically illustrated by Sarah Jane Lapp, who is here with us today, and a previous guest. And Sarah Jane and all the wonderful work that she has done and continues to do. We'll talk a little bit about that later, as well as Devin Rice, who is the producer of that as a Washington PSA. But we look at that and we say, let's protect the gift that has been given to us, this world and this environment. And what can we do in terms of protecting that? We'll talk about that today as well. You're going to hear some phenomenal speakers. I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker, Dr. Gerald Torres. He's a professor of environmental justice at the Yale School of Environment and professor at the Yale Law School. He's former president of the Association of American Law Schools and has taught at Stanford Law School and at Harvard Law School, where he served as the Oneida Nation Visiting Professor of Law. Professor Torres served as the counsel to the Attorney General on Environmental Matters and Indian Affairs at the U.S. Department of Justice. He has served on the board of the Environmental Law Institute, the EPA's National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and the National Petroleum Council. He is the board chair of Earth Day Network and founding chairman of the Advancement Project, the leading civil rights advocacy organization in the country. He is a trustee of the Natural Resource Defense Council, and Professor Torres has just been appointed to the advisory council of the Connecticut Sea Grant. He has served as a consultant to the United Nations on environmental matters and is a life member of the American Law Institute and the Council on Foreign Relations. I can't say enough about Dr. Torres. I'm going to turn it over to you this morning. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Of course, I almost made the rookie mistake of not unmuting myself, so I just dodged that bullet. But thank you for that generous introduction. You know, it's it really is just sort of the process of doing the work, and you know, that clip put me in mind of my favorite gospel song, which is "It Is No Secret," and I like to reflect. If I could sing it, I would sing it, but I'm not gonna. In any event, thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank Brenda in particular for organizing this and for inviting me. And I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. You know, I can only, you know, kind of skim the surface in 20 minutes, so I apologize for that. But in your questions, maybe we can go a little deeper. So I'm going to do three things. One, I'm going to talk about the evolution of environmental justice and where it came from and where it sits currently. Second, I'm going to talk about the evolution of our awareness of climate disruption. And then I'm going to link the two and talk about how they fit together. The title of my talk is Climate Justice is Environmental Justice. And that's essentially the point I want to make, because what has arisen is a recognition of the linkage of those two movements. So people, one of the great things about environmental justice currently is that it has finally penetrated, I would say, the corridors of power. It started, and everyone needs to recognize that it arises from a movement of people who organized to resist the impact of the unfair distribution of environmental burdens that are necessarily associated with our industrial economy. And out of the broad grassroots movement, it then started to transform policy, first at the local level and the state level, but finally at the national level. One of the things that I got to do when I was at the Department of Justice was to help actually take the principal drafting role in the Executive Order on Environmental Justice 12898. And the way I constructed it is consistent with what I've just told you. So rather than sitting at my desk and asking what should the executive order say, I invited environmental justice groups that I could identify from around the country to come into Maine Justice and talk to me and tell me what their understanding of environmental justice was, because it has many local expressions. And the way in which the communities that are raising the issue conceive of the issue, in my view, had to be incorporated in whatever direction we would give to the government. Having said that, hearing the words, as we did when the Biden administration assumed the presidency, but to hear the words environmental justice come out of the president's mouth is in fact a watershed event. Because that means you've taken all of this work that started at the grassroots level, and through, at least I've been involved in it since 1978. So it's been a while, right? But through the hard work, the patient work, the dedicated work, it has finally constructed enough policy heft that it informs everything the administration is doing at the federal level for addressing environmental problems. So the Justice 40 program under the Biden administration reflects that. But it's not just at the national level. What you also see is you see New Jersey, New York, and California. Actually, Pennsylvania has some initiatives of states recognizing that environmental justice has to be integrated into the way people think about managing or addressing environmental problems, so that the idea of the justice impact is now going to be integral to the way people think about the solutions that they propose. And it's going to be a metric by which people can assess the effectiveness of those programs. The first big national awareness of environmental justice probably came with the Church of Christ study on hazardous waste sites. And what it recognized, what it demonstrated, is that the hazardous waste sites, the federally licensed hazardous waste sites in the United States, are predominantly located in African-American communities. And that when you do a regression analysis and try to figure out what variables can be used to explain the location, what they discovered was that in fact race was the most highly correlated variable, which actually leads to a point I'll get back to, but it leads to the idea that's emerged recently called, which the literature calls sacrifice zones. And I'll get back and talk about that in a minute. One of the things that I discovered though, and one of the things that the literature seems to bear out, is that the communities that are most at risk are those communities which have the least political cohesion. So that, in fact, communities that are in the process of transformation, where where there's no basis for organizing that community, are often at risk for essentially bad citing decisions. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that environmental justice is beyond just where things get cited, but as to that point. And one of the things that I think explains it is and we see it in contemporary politics now. It's what I call the kind of the reinscription of the old scripts about racial communities and racial politics. So, and that's used to divide communities and reduce the capacity of those communities to resist. There's another side of it that's also important, though, and it actually was there at the beginning of the environmental justice movement, and that was the labor side of the environmental justice movement. In fact, the first meeting I ever attended was convened by a group that no longer exists called the Environmentalists for Full Employment, which was a union-based environmental group, as well as Sierra Club and the Urban League. So the main point of the environmental justice movement that I want you to take away is that it wasn't conceived in a library. It wasn't conceived in a policy think tank. It was built from the ground up. It was built from the actions of people who recognized issues and problems in their lives, then organized and tried to give a name to the things that they were experiencing. So that's the first one. Second, let's turn now to climate disruption. The first lecture I went to by earth scientists who identified the problems related with greenhouse gas accumulation was back in 1974. So it's been a while. I only tell you that to underline the fact that this is not a problem that has snuck up on people. Right? People didn't wake up yesterday and discover that climate disruption is a problem. In fact, the earth scientists have been following this problem for a while and have been concerned about the substantive impacts of this problem for a while. In fact, the former dean of the Yale School of Environment, Gus Speth, has written a book entitled "They Knew," in which he goes through and captures all of the governmental studies covered at least 50 years, in which they noted the issues of increased greenhouse gas accumulation. And he doesn't just note the studies. What he does in that book is he traces them to the awareness of those studies up through the various policy levels. So President Carter was briefed on the problem of climate disruption. The scientists knew this was happening. What's new is an awareness of the differential impacts of climate change and the way in which it maps onto the way in which it maps onto the issues that have been raised by environmental justice communities. So I want to step back and talk just about climate disruption for a moment. The couple of things that you have to be aware of is, while it's a global phenomenon, that it's going to impact climate and weather events and across the globe, it always has a particular manifestation. So it's a global problem, but you have to understand it in its particular expression. It also has profound cultural consequences. So those communities that have the ways of life that are transformed because of the impact of climate change on the material circumstances is one of the issues that we'll need to understand, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So that the climate disruption is going to affect coastal communities. Rhode Island is certainly going to be impacted. Connecticut's going to be impacted. Every coastal community is going to be impacted. But it's not just that. It's the changing in cropping patterns means that the effect on the agricultural systems is going to have severe consequences for farming and for agricultural communities. But then as well, it's going to have impacts on the way we feed ourselves. The other thing it has an impact on is various heat-related issues. So one of the things that the literature seems to show is that the issues of the health-related issues of heat, intense heat, is probably one of the greatest threats to certainly urban life, but also human life in general. And I want to extend beyond human life. You know, everything that I'm talking about that affects humans affects other life forms as well. And I think we need to be conscious of that. Here in the Northeast, you know, we are experiencing it by the impact of invasive species and pests that previously couldn't survive here. So, you know, since I moved to Connecticut, like everyone in New England, I'm conscious of ticks. And in fact, we now have far more virulent ticks that previously couldn't survive the weather in New England and now can. So it has you know, varieties of impacts. So how are these two connected? They're connected in this way. All of the communities that have been identified as environmental justice communities, which have suffered the consequences of the maldistribution of our environmental burdens, are in fact the same communities that are going to be impacted by climate disruption. And so it will be not just the direct impact of pollution loads, but it'll also be the follow-on consequences of the industrial system that produced those pollution loads. Now, I want to be clear that the environmental justice movement is not about just equalizing the burden. Right? It's about reducing the burden that we all have to face. And so when you think about the things that people are doing to address climate, they in fact are parallel to the policy approach that the environmental justice movement has taken, which is we don't want to just equalize the burden that people are bearing. We want to reduce the burden that everyone has to bear. We don't want just our communities to be taken care of when you address climate disruption. We want to address the root causes of climate disruption and ask how can those be mitigated such that we can start to focus on things like resilience and adaptation, and ask how resilience and adaptation might be justly apportioned, so that when you're doing climate justice, if that's the issue that you want to focus on, you necessarily have to understand it within the conceptual framework of environmental justice. And that means you have to both work, you have to do individual things that you can do, you have to work with the groups that are directly responding to climate, but it seems to me that you also have an obligation to engage environmental justice communities and ask how can those environmental justice communities be motivated to frame their work consistent with this broader goal. Let me give you just one example. So I told you that heat is a major health threat. One of the things that environmental justice advocates have noted and climate advocates have noted, is that the prevalence of green cover, and here we're talking mainly about canopy, trees that are in cities, has a direct impact on the heat in urban areas. So those urban areas that have more green cover or parks or just boulevard trees, in fact, are more able to deal with heat events. That's one. Two, canopy also reduces particulate matter in air, so that those communities that have greater green coverage have better air quality, merely because it captures particulate matter, which of course the fine particulate matter is directly associated with things like asthma. The other thing that they've discovered is that green coverage, which of course is tied both to environmental justice and to climate justice, has profound impacts on mental health. And that stress, communities are less stressed to the extent that they have availability for people to access green spaces, or for the communities themselves just to be greener. So here, that's in some ways a very small local thing, but it has these profound impacts for each community. So that I'll close. I think I've taken 20 minutes, and I don't want to take more than my allotted time, but I'm quite willing to answer any questions. The message for today is that these two broad movements, which recognize threats not just to individual communities, but that identify the way in which the system of addressing these problems has in fact been distorted and created both unequal burdens and unequal access to policymaking. Those problems exist in both movements. That the communities that are identified as environmental justice communities are the same communities that are going to be burdened in the first instance more heavily by localized expressions of climate disruption. And there is a unity between those two communities that policy ought to reflect. And it can be done at every single level. So it can be done at the neighborhood level, it can be done at the city level, it can be done at the state level, it can be done at the regional level, it can be done at the national level, and finally, it has to be done at the international level. And they're all linked together. So I will just leave you with that. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. I don't think I took more than my 20 minutes. So anyway, thank you.
Questions? Does anybody have any questions or comments for Dr. Torres?
Ms. Eastman.
This is a comment, but thank you for your talk. But you mentioned that things can be helped on various levels. Well, one of the levels that I've noticed is I get requests from the Arbor Day Foundation to donate, of course, but the result of donating is that they send you trees. And so I said, well, I can afford, a couple of bucks and I will receive trees and I will plant them. I've got a couple of locations I can put them in. I mean, it's not a big contribution, but it is a contribution. So if anyone is thinking about trying to do something, I mean, obviously we all recycle and all that, but if you can get a tree and plant it, it's not a bad thing.
I absolutely completely endorse that. In fact, if you were to go to the website of Earth Day, what you'll see is there's a place where you can we used to call it a billion acts of green, where you can do something for the environment and register the thing you've done. And one of the reasons we put that together was that we're now over, I think, 2 billion acts of green that people have registered. But the reason we did that was when we go to policymakers, we want to say, look, it's not just, enviros who are doing this, right? We have 2 billion people who are committed to making the environment better. And one thing that policymakers and certainly politicians can do, we know the one thing they can do is they can count. Right? And we need to take the environmental voices that we hear and turn them into voters, and making sure that the environmental issues are directly linked to all the other issues actually that people care about: water quality, heating and cooling prices, water availability, the energy transition from fossil fuels to green energy, and what's the cost, and how is that going to be cost going to be distributed? Jobs, right? Where are the jobs for the transition, the green energy transition? And all of those are just expressions of taking the idea of justice and using it to interrogate policy questions, environmental policy questions. And when you do that, you actually start to come up with answers that are—
What are you doing, step bro?
Oops. Anyway, so that's all I would say. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I'd be happy to answer.
Again, another comment is another thing that we can do on our individual level is when you mentioned Earth Day, when they do have these cleanup programs, show up. And I cleaned along the Blackstone River last year, and which is where I walk along the bike path of the Blackstone River. I felt proud as a peacock. And then this year it's all back to the same trash. I don't understand why people feel that they can throw bottles and cans and dog waste and all that along the side of the river. Take it home with you. But people are lazy and they don't see the problem, Dr. Torres. They don't see.
I mean, one of the things that's necessary, right, is to make sure that people understand what they view as an individual action is in fact having social consequences. Now, I did spend 25 years in Texas, and I know people have various views about Texas and don't want to engage in that debate. But I just want to tell you a story. Right, Texas had a program called "Don't Mess with Texas," which everyone now is, it's been changed into a different thing, but in fact was an anti-litter campaign. And the Don't Mess with Texas anti-litter campaign actually reduced litter in Texas by 75%. Because what it did was to take the act of littering and say, that you're messing with the whole state, right? And now I'm afraid Don't Mess with Connecticut won't have the same the same valence, but you take my point. Ms. Lapp.
Hi,
Sarah Jane Lapp has a question. Sarah Jane has a question.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your wisdom this morning. I wanted to see if you could speak to, I don't know if this is something you track, the Enbridge pipeline projects.
Well, I can. It's under litigation. It's in litigation now. I mean, I don't know if you had a specific question or you just wanted me to talk about it.
I think I had some sort of maybe delusional expectations based on what happened in the Dakotas with DAPL, that there would be a kind of triumph of water rights. And then watching the really litigious process with Enbridge has been really, sorry to say this, depressing. And I have this fantasy that you have some workaround or some understanding of
Well,
how there could, yeah. Thoughts?
no, I wish I did have a magic wand, right? That I could wave, but I do know the people who are litigating that issue, and I want to put it in a slightly different context. I mean, I think the question will be whether the issues that are raised by the tribal nations there will be able to be understood consistent with the legal challenges, and because it's not on tribal land, but it's on Aboriginal land, but not the reserve, and it does have an impact, however, on some of the resources that the tribal nation depends on. And I'm going to tell you two stories. One about Enbridge in particular, one a little bit broader. One of the transformations that we see, or at least that I've tracked because of the work I do, is the recognition that opportunities for co-management of resources with tribal nations, states, and the federal government are starting to materialize. And one of the issues of Enbridge, of course, is that this is Aboriginal land, but it's not trust land. And so does the Aboriginal quality of the land have claims or provide claims that the tribe might raise? And the tribe has done a couple of other things. A number of tribal nations, and globally, not just the United States, have essentially created rights in things themselves, that the water and the land has interests of its own that we are trying to defend. The Penobscot tribe in Maine have made the Penobscot River consistent with their traditions, a citizen of the tribe. Right, so that the New Zealand has a national policy now that gives legal standing to natural formations, rivers, forests, hills, and mountain ranges, and then it's devising the process for working. And in Ecuador and Peru also have now legal systems to take into account natural systems within the framework. It's within the rights framework. So Enbridge, our legal system doesn't recognize it. Okay. So the question will be whether the litigation can be done in a way that produces the capacity for a settlement to be reached that reflects those interests. You know, it's going to be hard fought, but you know, no defeat is ever final. Let me put it that way. But neither is any victory. Okay. And so it does require, you know, kind of consistent work. Some of the work I'm doing is on the impact of social movements to produce durable legal change. And when you start to do that research, you recognize that there's a longitudinal element to movements. And I like to remind my students that the baseline that they're starting from now isn't the baseline that I started from. Right? That the baseline I started from actually reflects all of the, or the baseline they're starting from actually reflects all of the work that's gone on in the 50 years before they matriculated. So it's important to remember that even though if you all are like me and impatient, right, you want it to happen today, right? But you recognize that it's not gonna, right? And so you've got to you have to keep your shoulder to the wheel and just keep pushing. Enbridge is, it'll be interesting to see, because that's good. I know the lawyers who are litigating that are extremely good lawyers. The question is whether there's sufficient legal purchase to be able to at least move the state and the company to discuss. I mean, our Children's Trust, which I've also been involved with, the case that the children are bringing out of Oregon, actually all 50 states now, they filed suit. Also is an effort to change the discussion. And, part of the what I was describing in my kind of thumbnail sketch of both the EJ movement and climate change movement is the way in which the discussion has been changed. Right, so that the way we talk about these issues, the way we conceive of these issues, is the residue of concerted action, and that's important.
I'm going to unmute myself. Thank you, Dr. Torres. And I don't know, you alluded to the patience piece. We're all very patient people, and we have some people that are, more patient than others, but we thank you so much and applaud your efforts and all of your hard work and everything that you have done, in this important field and in this important work. And so for pioneers such as yourself and being able to, pave the way for others and thinking about these issues and understanding that we do have a great gift, our earth, and that, it's been given to us to take care of. So we appreciate your time and we appreciate your effort this morning. We'd just like to say thank you on behalf of this committee, and also thank you on behalf of Beneficent Congregational Church and the University of Rhode Island Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies. So thank you so very much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all for listening politely.
Yeah, thank you. We have with us Colin Murphy, and Colin is with the Mindfulness Center at Brown University. And Colin, welcome. Thank you. I don't know if you'd like to say a few words before you get started this morning. One of my challenges is going to be, there's always a disruption or two in an event like this, especially when people are trying to get their points across. So I'm just going to keep an eye on it and just make sure that you are willing to take us through this guided meditation this morning. So welcome, Colin.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for the invitation to be here and the opportunity to be with you all today. Such an important topic, such a wonderful opening, Dr. Torres. That was very thought-provoking, and appreciate that. People expressing themselves as they do sometimes with Zoom bombing, I guess we call it, or Zoom barging in, I guess you'd say. There's an opportunity in the security settings to remove the ability for someone to unmute themselves. And I sometimes do that when I'm leading online meditations. It just, they may put stuff in the chat or put stuff on their screen, but the noise is the one that kind of catches people. So that's an opportunity item, you all can consider. So yeah, I'm Colin Murphy, and I work at the Mindfulness Center at Brown. The Mindfulness Center teaches and researches mindfulness programs. This morning, we're just going to have a brief mindfulness meditation. And we can just drop right in, right now, right here, into our own practice and into this practice together. So I'd invite you to settle into a posture that's supportive for you. If you're sitting, which looks like some are, an upright, awake posture. not rigid, but just allowing the base to be heavy and to support the body, support an uprightness of the spine and torso, allowing the chest to open, making space for the breath. And if you're comfortable, if it's supportive for you, closing your eyes or lowering your gaze. This first part of the practice, this settling in, you can really make it part of the practice for yourself. Checking in with your body, seeing how it is right now. In front of the body, back of the body, sides of the body. In this settling in time, bringing awareness to how you adjust yourself, what your body needs right now. And letting the process reflect a sense of care for yourself. Letting go of doing and just being. Being right here, right now. Being here together. And in a larger sense, being here in our own space and also in this shared space. The shared space of the environment, of the world, wherever we are. Bringing a compassionate sense to being with yourself, and bringing a gentle sense with being with each other. Connecting to this compassionate and gentle sense to being in our space and our shared space right now. As we practice, it may be supportive to find a stable place to settle your attention, a place to anchor your attention in this practice. So I invite you to consider just noticing breathing. Sometimes this is a supportive anchor, following the breath in and out, the sense of swelling and releasing, sense of rising and falling that the body naturally does. Maybe noticing where the breath is most prominent. The nostrils, the coolness of the breath entering, and the warmth of it exiting. Maybe a sense of the breath in the chest or the belly. And if you have been practicing mindfulness for a while, you may be aware of other ways of anchoring your attention, body sensations like the feel of your hands in your lap or your feet on the floor. Maybe contact with the chair or cushion. Whatever your focus of attention, noticing the texture, the qualities of that experience. Warmth, coolness, moisture, dryness. No need to change anything in any way, just noticing what's here for you right now in your practice. And as we practice, it may be supportive to give yourself permission to just be as you are right now. Whatever is arising for you, whatever sensations, thoughts, feelings. In letting go, it allows for space. And in that space, we can become more aware of our moment by moment experience. We also may connect with the shared experience of us being here together, practicing. And beyond us, the larger world of breathing beings, of trees, of streams, of fields. The larger sense of what's also beyond us. As we're practicing, placing our attention on whatever anchor we've chosen, we notice at times that attention wanders, caught by a thought or a sensation, something arising, something with a story. And you notice you're not attending to your anchor. It's good to remember that this is a normal part of the practice. Your attention will wander. And bringing your attention back is the practice. The practice is remembering. And with that, an opportunity arises to cultivate a patience with yourself, an acceptance, and a willingness to return back to this moment. mindfulness is sometimes described as a process of befriending our thoughts, befriending our feelings, befriending our physical sensations. Cultivating self-acceptance, a self-care, a turning towards our life and the present moment, a turning towards each other and the wider world. An observing of our experience in this moment. Right now, just this. And being aware of the possibility of stillness. No need to force anything or change anything. Now, just practice. This awareness we are connecting with is innate within us, available to us. We carry it with us. In the last few moments of the practice, I invite you to reconnect with your body if that's supportive. And in these last few moments, just sitting, knowing that in these moments, there's nowhere to get to. In these moments, there's nothing that needs to be done. In these moments, there's just sitting right here, right now. Settling into the space and resting with what is here right now, just as it is. As we come to the end of the practice, I invite you to take a fuller, more intentional breath in, and on the out breath, just releasing. And if your eyes are lowered or closed, raising them or opening your eyes and noticing around you your space, colors, shapes, textures, and then doing whatever's right for you and your body at this moment to transition, maybe a stretch, maybe wiggling your toes, whatever transition supports you as we end the practice. So again, thank you, Brenda, for the invitation to be here, and Pat, for all your work you're doing managing this, and for everyone who's here. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and be with you all this morning. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Colin, for that peaceful guided meditation. I don't know if you'd like to share anything with our group this morning about the Brown Mindfulness Center.
Sure, I can speak briefly about that. We do have some programs. We do programs in teacher training and also have some other programs that are available. If you hop over to the website, you can see those. The Mindfulness Center's mission is really, really wonderful because it's focused on both the presenting of some programs, but also on the research into what works and what's most effective. We're in the School of Public Health, and so mindfulness as an intervention, a public health intervention, is a wonderful way to think of the possibility. So we have some researchers that are working on things like addiction studies, using mindfulness to help people with use disorders. We have research into, fMRI machines, looking at the actual mechanics and neuroscience of it. And another researcher is working on an intervention for pregnant women with high blood pressure. High blood pressure has been shown to be, mindfulness has been shown to be helpful with high blood pressure. So there's all kinds of wonderful research going on. So if you check out the website, you can see some of the research and more programs. But thanks for the opportunity to share that. That's really quite happy with how that's working out over there.
Excellent.
Talk about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Colin. Greatly appreciated. And thank you for the work that you do. So appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
At this point in time, folks, you are all promised a break. We are going to take a 10-minute stretch break, refill your coffee mugs, go outside, feel a little sunshine on your face, but promise that you'll come back. And when we return, we have Sharon Lewis. So please take a 10-minute stretch break, folks, and then come back and join us. Thank you.
Jane, fuck up.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, welcome back. Again, as always, delighted to see all of you here, and thank you so much again for joining us. Just want to mention a couple of things to you. First, we're going to spin the wheel for our prize drawings before our next speaker. But I want to mention, if you haven't had the chance, get over to the Waterfire Art Center. For those of you that are not in Rhode Island, it's a nice little 90-minute drive if you're in Connecticut, but get over to the Waterfire Art Center in Providence. The installation that's there, it ends tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last day of the Planet Earth, the Environment, and Our Future. What a wonderful display it is. This exhibition, or the exhibition of art that's over there, Art and Science, presents over 30 spectacular artworks by contemporary artists that expand upon the interconnectedness between nature of the world, between nature and the world. So get over and see it. It's a wonderful, wonderful display. It's a good afternoon out, but I was just amazed. There's a huge, gigantic, rotating earth that's there, as well as some other exhibits and artworks, and always a gift shop to help support our environment and the work that is being done by the Waterfire Art Center. So if you get it, but I'm excited now to spin the wheel. I'm going to share screen, and this first prize that we're giving away is a subscription. Our committee wanted to make sure that we had a subscription available to Sierra Magazine. This magazine is published, it's an award-winning magazine, and they have some cutting-edge photography, some art, some video, and definitely dedicated to protecting our natural world. So I'm going to share screen, and I hope one of you are the lucky winners. All right, and this is how we do it, folks. I'm going to make it bigger so that you can see your name, and let's see who the first Sierra Magazine gifts goes to. Mr. Nelson. Kevin, congratulations. Congratulations, Kevin. You are the winner of our subscription to Sierra Magazine. We also have an annual, for those of you, this is our 4th annual Speak Peace Symposium. We have an annual peace candle that we give out. And the peace candle sort of brings, as what Colin was just talking about, sort of that uplifting harmony for your mind, for your heart, for your soul, also for our environment and for nature. So I'm going to spin, but congratulations, Kevin Nelson, on your subscription to Sierra Magazine. I'm also going to spin now for our wonderful peace candle. I know you're all excited. You're on the edge of your seats. I know you are. I know you are. Here we go. Oh, Pat Falcon. Pat Falcon, our moderator and close assistance today. Pat, thank you so much. Congratulations. You are the winner of our 2nd prize giveaway today. Little peace candle, and who but Pat, to add a little more peace to her already peaceful life, right, Pat? That would be right on point. So congratulations, Kevin. Congratulations, Pat. We have a couple more giveaways. I'm going to turn it over to Jane Eastman, and she is going to introduce our next guest. And Jane Eastman is one of our committee members. Jane, take it away. Unmute yourself and take it away.
Thank you, Brenda. Sharon Lewis is the executive director of the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice, which promotes environmental justice through community advocacy and engagement. She was exposed to advocacy at an early age. Born and raised in the civil rights era, she grew up in the movement to change life for African Americans. In the 1990s, she was working in the reinsurance industry. And just to tell you what that is, reinsurance is insurance that insurance companies buy to protect them from another company to protect themselves from the natural disasters that we are having currently, that just are financial tornadoes practically. So she was in the reinsurance industry. And she left that industry to become a social activist in the environmental justice movement, fighting for the rights of low income and communities of color to let them be free from pollution, to have equal access to the decision-making process with regards to environmental policies. She was instrumental in getting the state of Connecticut environmental justice law passed in 2009. In 2012, Ms. Lewis traveled to Costa Rica as a guest of the US State Department as an exchange fellow, where she partnered with other women environmental activists from both countries and learned firsthand how the people of Costa Rica balance protection of the environment with human health. The primary focus was on the reduction of plastics in the local waste. She fully supports a zero waste economy, where recycling, reducing, and reusing are the key elements of achieving environmental justice with regard to waste disposal. She's a graduate of Mount Holyoke College and worked for corporate America, as I said, in the reinsurance and insurance industry for 20 years. And it was her dealings with the Love Canal situation and the disparate treatment of the whites and people of color that gave rise to her interest in achieving environmental justice in low income and communities of color. She chairs the Connecticut Zero Waste Coalition and as well serves on several environmental and health organizations. Welcome, Ms. Lewis, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Brenda. Jane, I must start by saying thank you for that definition of reinsurance. You're the only one who has ever done it.
I didn't know what it was, so I had to find out for myself.
That's really great because I really got exposed to the natural catastrophes through reinsurance. Because as you mentioned, insurance companies buy insurance to protect themselves against these major catastrophes such as hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and on and on and on. So I know this is not a part of my time, but I just want to thank you for doing that. And I'm hoping that the people who are in the audience appreciate the fact that she has explained pretty much what I did in the reinsurance arena. And it dealt a lot with the polluting situations like Love Canal. So let me start. Brenda, can you show the first slide? I mean, the cover slide, actually, is what I'm looking for. The one that says, "Not in my backyard." Okay, this talk is called "Not in My Backyard, A Quest for Environmental Justice." Brenda, I'd also like you to start your clock, and I'm starting my timer because I can talk for very long periods of time, and I don't want to see that big hook of yours come out and kind of rein me in off the stage. But Not in My Backyard culminates what has happened in the environmental justice arena. I'd like to start with the definition. Not in my backyard, otherwise known as NIMBY, is an expression of opposition to change, opposition to anything that's undesirable in a community or a neighborhood or region. And it's basically opposition from white people. For decades, white homeowners have used NIMBY to keep polluting facilities out of their communities. Polluting facilities like power plants, mining operations, incinerators, landfills, small industrial facilities, even gas stations. But there's something else that they wanted out of their communities, and that was Black people. But I digress for a moment. Another definition I'd like to talk about is environmental justice. A lot of people don't quite understand what environmental justice is. And I would just tell you basically, it's another form of justice. So when we think of environmental justice, we think of a way that everyone can share equally in the benefits and in the burdens of the environment. We think of it as a way to make sure that there is fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, so that everyone who is impacted, especially those most impacted, are at those decision-making tables when those rules, those laws, those policies are formulated. And then thirdly, we believe that those who derive the benefits of a good environment should also sustain commensurate burdens. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and it has not been the case, because not everyone has access to a clean and healthy environment. And a lot of people are disproportionately exposed to the environmental ills, to the bad parts of the environment that affect their livelihoods and their health. But there's a reason for that. And the reason is this. You know, everybody here, I believe, in this audience has either heard of or have known people who were involved with the civil rights movement. And the civil rights gains did not make everybody happy. I learned a long time ago that laws don't change people. And that is very true. As a result of the civil rights gains, the federal government sanctioned another form of segregation. The federal government sanctioned redlining. The federal government sanctioned restrictive deeds that prevented people from selling and renting and allowing Black people to even spend the night in their homes. The federal government sanctioned zoning, restrictive zoning laws and land use policies. The federal government sanctioned the fact that Black people could not get insurance, couldn't get loans and mortgages, couldn't get jobs. It was all about continuing segregation. Through urban renewal, the federal government intentionally put highways through neighborhoods of color so that there would be a continuation of a separation of the races. And as a result of this federally sanctioned segregation, we find ourselves realizing that pollution is also segregated. It is an unfair relationship between pollution and race. In fact, this relationship is tied at the hip. You can't separate race from pollution, because everywhere in America and in the world, you will find that people of color live in what is called sacrifice zones. Not in my backyard, but put it in somebody else's backyard, and put it in the backyards of people whose lives we don't respect, and the backyards of people who don't matter. So the places where people of color have ended up living as a result of being pushed out of clean and healthy environments are called sacrifice zones. Now, what's a sacrifice zone? A sacrifice zone is a place where you're overwhelmed with polluting facilities, light industries such as dry cleaners and gas stations, freeways, railways, heavy truck and automobile traffic, Jiffy Lubes, gas stations, I think I said that already, auto repair shops, battery recycling plants, and regional incinerators, regional landfills, power plants, petrochemical plants, nuclear power plants. And also, you're pushed into an area where 1 in 7 of the public housing complexes throughout the United States are located within 1 to 3 miles of a Superfund site. You're pushed into undesirable areas where no one else wants to live, but you have no choice. So what happens to you when you're pushed into areas where highways run through your neighborhood, when you're pushed into areas where there's heavy contamination of the soil? Well, there is no alternative but to suffer from environmental health issues such as asthma, serious respiratory issues, People wonder why the Black community is so overwhelmed by COVID-19. Clearly, they don't understand, because we all know that COVID-19 is a respiratory illness. But if you're already predisposed to respiratory issues based upon the pollution that you breathe, naturally, you're going to have a higher incidence of COVID than anyone else. Not only incidence, but also mortality rate from COVID. And people who live in these sacrifice zones have high levels of cancer, all types of cancer, lead poisoning, cognitive and memory issues, low birth weight, diabetes and renal failure. Right now in the Black community, there is an epidemic of people who have kidney failure, and we're trying to figure that out. People of color are disproportionately affected by the health effects, disproportionately exposed to all of this pollution. And the question is, why? Why is pollution so segregated? Why is segregation so bad? When are we ever going to get rid of the not in my backyard philosophy? Why is it so important that it has to be your backyard versus my backyard? Why is it that so many people have never known what it's like to breathe fresh air? Why is it that so many people are still restricted from national, state, and local parks? Why is air pollution so serious in some areas? Why is water pollution so serious? Why is contaminated land everywhere you go in certain areas? Why is light pollution such an issue now? I think this is something we need to think about, because pushing people into unclean and unhealthy environments is something that harms us all. Right now, the biggest threat to our existence is climate change. And even though we are all experiencing it differently, and even though the people who are least able to recover from it are most affected, the people who are the least contributors to global warming and climate change are the ones who suffer the most. You must understand that if you don't take care of the weakest link, all of us will fail. So I'm going to stop here, because I promised Brenda that I would stop at 20 minutes, and I hope that I have done that. And thank you so much for listening to me. My presentations are usually much longer, and I'm very proud of myself that I'm able to at least review part of some of the environmental injustice history that I brought to you today. Thank you.
Now, and thank you, Sharon. Now, I have a question for you, as well as the rest of the group. And also, if you have any questions, those of you that are participating today, please, let me know. One of the things that we know is that there have been tons of surveys and tons of studies that have been done about young people. I think in terms of some of the things that you mentioned, maybe perhaps in the same way, I guess I'm going to paraphrase or rephrase. And that question happens to be, what can we do about children who are exposed to traumatic events, such as the natural disasters that you meant, such as the displacement that you meant in these areas, especially the urban areas that you, alluded to. We know that, for children, high levels of stress is associated, and also, as you mentioned, can affect the long-term brain development of these children living in these urban areas. And so I'm wondering, what can be done? What can we do?
Okay. First of all, I forgot to ask you to loop my presentation, and it's basically just a series of photos showing all types of pollution. And if you can just imagine living within all this pollution. To answer your question, I used to be a teacher. After I retired from the reinsurance industry, I taught in the Hartford public school system. And I found that children are so traumatized by so many issues, social issues. And the climate and the existing situations where they live is just one other example of what it is. Part of what we do is bring awareness to people about the environmental exposures that they're experiencing, because they don't know that they're being exposed to lead poisoning. They don't know that the pollution is what's causing their asthma. They don't know that by living next to a highway entrance or exit ramp, that their respiratory illnesses from the tailpipe emissions could be exacerbated. They don't know. So the biggest part is bringing awareness. Second part is, it's all about economics. What can a parent do when they cannot afford to live somewhere else? What can a parent do when, due to racism and segregation and unfair housing laws, that they have no place to live? And basically what people do is they move around like pieces on a checkerboard, from one bad and unhealthy environment to another. And it's very concerning to me, because I was in classrooms with children who could not learn, who had cognitive issues, who had ADHD, who could not pay attention. Some children were also very aggressive, didn't understand why they were that way. Parents didn't understand why they were that way. Nobody said, oh, well, maybe it's because of where you live. Maybe you're breathing in this terrible pollution. Maybe you're drinking water that has lead in it. Maybe your child is exposed to lead-based paint. Nobody tells people this. So you could live in an environment where you're exposed to an unreasonably, exceptionally high level of lead, and then go from that apartment to another apartment where you're next door to an incinerator and you're exposed to different types of pollution. So number one, get the children out of these terrible exposures. And it's very difficult, because due to racism, it's an impossible task these days.
Question. Let me see. There's a question in chat. Let me see if I can get to it. Ms. Lewis, are there still present day sacrifice zones? If so, how can we bring more awareness to these sacrifice zones and the harmful effects on our children, especially in our communities of color or financially challenged families?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because you make it sound as though I was talking entirely in the past, and I wasn't. Sacrifice zones is basically a new term, because they still exist all throughout the United States. See, when we're in Connecticut, we think that we don't have the problems that other people do, and we don't. We're not the Houstons of the world. We're not Cancer Alley in Louisiana. We're not in California. We're not in Kentucky. Most of the fossil fuel industry is located in the South, and most people of color live in the South. And these sacrifice zones are just that. Black Lives Matter is a very important movement, because people need to know that it's not okay to just put a regional incinerator where Black people live, so that you can just go to your transfer station and go back home and not understand that your trash is going to be burned where people live. People need to understand that it's not okay to just run a highway through a Black community, but not run one in your community. I'm quite old, and I remember years wherein I've never seen a gas station in a suburban area. And for the folks who believe in the NIMBYism, they knew that power plants are dangerous. They knew that mining operations are dangerous. They knew that they did not want a landfill. Can you imagine what that would do to your property values? They knew that they did not want a highway running through their neighborhood. Forget about the air pollution. What about the noise? They know this, and yet they also think it's okay to put it where somebody else lives, as long as it doesn't affect them. And therein lies the problem. We as a people have got to stop this madness. It's not okay to say that I'm going to live in a healthy environment and that my kids are going to be educated without encumbrances from social issues, and yours can't.
Thank you. Let me see if there are any other questions, or they don't have to be questions, as I always say, they could be comments or thoughts that you might have in reference to the NIMBY, or just in general, questions for Sharon Lewis. She's got a plethora of experience.
I would just like to say thank you so much. Your presentation was very informative. Thank you for allowing yourself to be exposed the way you have been. It's sad that we have to experience the different things in which we're doing when we're talking about saving our environment and our community. But I just like to say thank you so much. What you have said has triggered a lot in me, and is bringing about a lot of ways in which to be more informed and more aware. So Mrs. Lewis, thank you extremely from the depths of my heart for taking the time out to be at this symposium today. And I also want to say to Dr. Torres the same as well. You both were excellent presenters, very informative and very educational. Thank you, Brenda, for this symposium today. You have been an excellent host, and to everyone here, thank you and much peace to everybody.
And can I just say one thing too, because I want to make sure that you understand that an environmental justice community is not a low-income Black community. It's low income, and because race, not income, is the #1 factor when it comes to determining where something is going to be put in a community. I grew up in an affluent Black community, and we lived next to the North Hartford landfill. There's a railway running through our community. I could walk to the entrance of the highway if I wanted to. There's all types of light industry. In fact, there's a group of people who live around the corner from me called SOS, Survivors on Sunset. They live closer to the highway than anybody in the neighborhood, and everyone, 100% of everyone who lives there has some form of cancer. I still live in the community. I should have moved away years ago, but I cannot really effectively advocate unless I'm part of. I can't use the word we if I'm not living in it. So I will tell you that in the past few months, I found out that I have stage 3 kidney failure. I have asthma. I have high blood pressure. I have diabetes. And I do believe that all of this is related to my constant exposure of all of the different types of pollutants that I breathe in on a daily basis. And just imagine what other people go through, the other illnesses they have. The fact that I have insurance is really important. Well, what about the people who don't?
Thank you for that enlightenment. You are absolutely correct. Thank you so much, and you are in my thoughts and prayers always.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Comments, thoughts, questions that come to mind? Jane? Go ahead, Jane.
Me, Jane? Okay.
Yes.
This is a comment or a question that's going to take far too long, but even if the peoples in the affected areas are invited to the table for these discussions, how does it get changed? Because the powers that be, they've already made up their minds as to where they're going to put that big disgusting spewing what do you call it, the pipes and So, I mean, they've already made up their minds. I mean, if they invite people in the neighborhood to come and discuss it, they're not going to change their mind.
Well, I think that you're right. And I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, the EPA has developed this definition of environmental justice that basically states that it's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people with respect to the development of these laws, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the problem. In the past, the people who were most impacted by these decisions were never a part of a decision-making process. One of the things that we do is prepare people for a place at those tables. We educate them. We make them understand what it is they're hearing. We also teach them how to articulate their stories. Now, the issue is not, well, I personally believe that diversity for diversity's sake means nothing. You just can't have a person of color at the table. You just can't have a person most impacted at the table without power. Now, I'm not saying that we should even replace all of these decision makers because that's never going to happen, but we need to have allies. Unfortunately, the people who make these decisions who are not Black need to understand what it's like. Nothing disgusts me more than to deal with fake equity advocates who don't have a person of color who even they can say is their friend, let alone being in the communities where people live. Step aside. You don't need to be at that table. But if you are a person who is not a person of color, who understands the concepts fully and allows people to tell their stories and listens to people because they have the expertise, not you. They live in those communities. What you read and the books that you write are not necessarily true because you don't respect people and their opinions. So if we have people's opinions who are respected, then things can change because then you can say, no, we don't want that highway in our neighborhood. But basically what usually happens is, for example, when an incinerator is going to be sited in a community, they never use the word incinerator. They say trash to energy. And the average person is going to say, hey, that's a really good idea. We're going to burn trash to produce energy. Oh yeah, I'm for that. But in reality, they don't tell you the truth about, well, we're going to put this incinerator where you live so that we don't have to breathe this incinerated poor air. And that because you're sacrificial lamb, you live in a sacrifice zone, and because your life doesn't matter, oh, well, you know, we'll find out if it kills you or not. So to answer your question, there is hope that things will change, but the makeup of the folks at those tables need to also change. Mm-hmm. And people who are white and not Black need to understand fully and be true equity advocates in order for it to change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Sarah, you have Sarah Jane, excuse me, you have a question?
Do we have time, Brenda, for another?
Absolutely, please.
Sharon, this was a great presentation. Thank you. I'm not familiar with your organization. Are you able to tell us about one of your campaigns where you're able to get stakeholders to the table and maybe reverse some unfriendly decisions? Is that
well, yeah. We're a community-based organization, community-run, community-led. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary next year. We are a multi-issue organization. So with that being said, just imagine how busy I am all the time because environmental justice is nuanced in so many different ways. There's transportation, there's food justice, there's climate justice, housing justice, education, and health, of course. Our number one role is to hold people accountable, to hold municipalities and policymakers accountable, and to hold corporations accountable for what they do to human health and the environment. Our number one goal is to abolish all of the racism that causes the inequitable and disproportionate exposures from all that's bad about the environment. We were very, 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 very instrumental in getting Connecticut's first environmental justice law passed in 2009. Actually, it became effective in 2009. And basically, it's a law that stressed public participation every step of the way. It's very important for the community to know and to hear from the polluters. This is what I'm going to do to you. So if you want to have any questions, go at it. So we were instrumental in making sure that Connecticut had that law where the community was involved and that the polluters had to inform the communities. Now, I think it was what, 14 years or 15 years. Things have changed now, and we're trying to strengthen that law to give the state more ability to say no. Right now, there's no way to say no if an industry wants to add more to the stress of what's existing in the community. You know, you could have 10 polluting facilities in one particular area, and there's no law that says they can't add another one. So we're trying to work on the cumulative impact of that. To me, my most memorable win was when we fought to shut down Bridgeport Harbor power plant. It was a coal-fired power plant. And the win was very sweet because it was all from the efforts of the community in and around Bridgeport, Connecticut. We were also instrumental in making sure that the diesel buses were retrofitted with the pollution control devices, the diesel idling law, which I'm sure you all have seen, signs that says no idling here, no idling there. That's very, very important. I mean, just imagine, and I remember as a teacher having to bring my class out to a plethora of buses lined up on the curb, and they're all running. So the kids are outside inhaling all that diesel exhaust because the tailpipes were very low at child level. And you wonder why so many children have asthma, but that's another issue. So right now we're working on so many different things. As Jane mentioned, I'm chair of the Connecticut Zero Waste Coalition, and that has a twofold purpose. Number one, to eliminate the incinerators in Connecticut. And number two, to push Connecticut towards a zero waste economy. You know, we want people to understand that we throw away too much. We waste so much, and we don't recycle as much as we think we do. The problem is when we don't recycle and when we waste and when we throw things away, guess where they go? They go to communities of color to be burned or to be landfilled. So the less you send my way, the healthier I am. And we want people to understand, you know, stop the madness. You know, we as a nation, as a people, we have this sort of throwaway economy whereby, you know, I'll just buy 10 copies of this because I like every color, or I'll just, you know, I don't like last year's model of something, you know, and not only us, but the industry as well. You know, we want to hold the producers responsible. How many times have you, well, I'll tell you about me. I've gone to a supermarket and picked up a package of hamburger and my thumb goes through the plastic, but try opening up a CD. It's virtually impossible. How is that possible? Whereby you can contaminate a package of meat, but you can't get into a CD. In addition to that, look at all the packaging that comes along with little things that we buy. And what do? We just throw it away. And guess where it goes? It goes to the landfill, it goes to the incinerators where people live, and people are exposed to all of these things. So we're trying to change people's attitude about waste. We're trying to change the attitudes of the industries about the production. You know, what are you doing? Because at the end of the day, the more paper and plastic and things we have to go through, we're paying for all of that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well said. Sharon Lewis, thank you so much joining me. Please enjoy.
Thank you for having me.
Join me in thanking you for your time, for your energy, for the work that you do, and the passion that you have, you know, to do this work, because the work can be done, but without the passion behind it, without the, you're vulnerable words and talking to us about how this is affecting you both professionally and personally. So thank you so much for sharing that with us this morning. Truly appreciate it. And we appreciate you being here. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Jane Houle. Jane Houle is one of our committee members, and I'm going to ask Jane if she would introduce our third speaker this morning. Jane?
I'd love to, Brenda. Good morning, everyone. Topher Hamblett is the Director of Advocacy for Save the Bay, where he coordinates the organization's major campaigns, policy work, and legislative initiatives. He has been with the organization for 25 years, working on water quality, habitat restoration, public access, and climate change at the local, state, and national levels. He represents Save the Bay at the Rhode Island General Assembly, municipal forums, and in media interviews. Topher is also president and founder of the Foundation for West Africa, a Rhode Island-based organization that supports community radio stations in Sierra Leone and neighboring countries. He served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Sierra Leone from 1985 to 1987. He has served on the board of directors of Common Cause Rhode Island Public Radio, and Dorcas International Institute. Currently, he serves on the board of the New England First Amendment Coalition. And we are so happy and feel so honored to have him share his time with us today. Thank you.
Jane, thank you. And thank you all for having me here. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to do this. I also want to thank Brenda for reaching out in the first place and making it possible. I also just want to thank Dr. Torres and Ms. Lewis for their presentations, which were really informative and also moving as well. So thank you all. I will say this is a peace building group here, and I really do think of the work that my colleagues and I do in West Africa as peace building. That all started coming out of a brutal civil war that was born of injustice in Sierra Leone, and people globally need a voice. And over there, radio stations are, if you go see a radio station in Sierra Leone, you'll see painted in bold letters on the side of the wall outside, the voice for the voiceless. And I think a lot of what we just heard is about that. People need a voice. People have been denied a voice in deciding what goes on in their communities. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So very quickly, and in the time I have, I would actually like to really, for all you Rhode Island residents, take what Ms. Lewis did and make it real in terms of what you see around you. Before doing that, though, because I think a lot of what I heard from Ms. Lewis really, everything that we see and are working on really came to life. So just a bit of background about Save the Bay. We were founded in 1970 by a group of citizens in Tiverton, Rhode Island. Back then, the Narragansett Bay had all kinds of issues, but they faced the prospect of a major oil refinery being built in their town. And this oil refinery and the company that pushed it was promising good paying jobs, great tax revenue, and not only no impact to the community in terms of environment and health, but actually it'll make your community better. And actually most of the political forces of the day, both locally and statewide, were actually supported this proposal. This was the energy boom of the 70s. And just a handful of people dared to question all those promises and assumptions that were being put forth. And they actually went around the country to some of the communities that were just talked about and learned for themselves that what was being promised was actually a false bill of goods. And they challenged it and they challenged it and they kept challenging it until it came down to a town council vote, and they won and defeated that proposal by 1 vote. And that spoke volumes. So this group saw what was happening around Narragansett Bay and decided to form what is now Save the Bay in 1970. And it spent a decade fending off proposals to build nuclear plants, liquid natural gas terminals in Narragansett Bay, excuse me, and other fossil fuel facilities all around the bay. And they succeeded in the 1970s, which was a great accomplishment. Narragansett Bay, the Narragansett Bay you know today would be very different. It would be heavily industrialized. And we would see a lot more air and water pollution than we do today. But so I really, we all owe them a great debt of gratitude. But picking up on what Ms. Lewis said, while the broad scale industrialization of Narragansett Bay was sort of fended out, what that meant was that the communities that were the center of a lot of these activities already, mainly the south side of Providence, Fields Point, Allen's Avenue, the Port of Providence, those wound up attracting more of these polluting industries. And I think this is a sort of a tale of two bays, if you will. I do want to talk about a couple things. One is how much things have improved in terms of the water quality of Narragansett Bay and Upper Narragansett Bay and the Providence River, but also the problems that remain and the challenges that remain for all of us. So in the 1970s and in the 80s, the Upper Narragansett Bay, the Providence River, the Seekonk River, the rivers that flow into what is today Water Place Park in Providence, those were open sewers. So there was no control of industrial waste, toxics from the jewelry manufacturing industry, from the old industries that had been around since the Industrial Revolution. Those remained unchecked. So this Blackstone River used to run the colors of the dyes that were being dumped into it from dyeing industries. Dead fish were washing up on shores. There were what were called grease balls washing up on shores because the sewage that was untreated and running through the old City of Providence sewage plant just ran right through it and washed up on the shores of a half dozen communities, most significantly Providence and East Providence and Cranston. The water was unsafe to touch. So it was an awful situation. Around the late 70s, Save the Bay and others took legal action and sued the City of Providence for its violation of the Federal Clean Water Act, which is supposed to protect us all. That led to the creation of the Narragansett Bay Commission, which over the ensuing decades has become a top-rate award-winning wastewater management facility. And I will fast forward to 2022. If you go out, probably on a day like today, if you go out on the Providence River, you will see hundreds of people fishing from boats. You'll see the community boating program off India Point thriving. You see more people walking the shore where you can walk the shore. People are kayaking, fishing. We are at the point now where we're closing in on the day when Sabin Point in East Providence can actually open up as a bathing beach, a licensed bathing beach with a lifeguard, which was just unthinkable not too long ago. So the strides that have been made for cleaning up urban waters has been great. The last piece of that is what's known as the Combined Sewer Overflow Project, which is now in its third phase. And this is where I want to get into sort of the dynamics of environmental justice a bit. In the mid-1990s, when the Narragansett Bay Commission was figuring out how to end raw sewage overflows to the Providence and Seekonk rivers and nearby waters, I was part of a stakeholder group at the Bay Commission. And I can tell you that the communities that Ms. Lewis was talking about were not represented there. And I can share with you some of the conversation at the time was something like this. This is going to be expensive. These are urban waters. We need to spend money on other things. And if you live in Providence and surrounding communities, you live in an urban area, and that's just the way it is. And that was a mindset that was pretty strong at the time. And I rarely lose my cool at the table in public for Save the Bay, but that was one instance where I did. And our position was and is, no matter who you are, no matter where you live, you have a right to clean water, and you have a right to access clean water. So to the notion of accepting sewage-filled water in your community just because you live in a city is just unacceptable. But I was floored at the time that people were even talking at those terms, and this is 1995-ish. So, but anyway, we all prevailed, and the river has become a spectacular place for everyone. The other bit of progress that's been made is that there's much more access to the waterfront than there used to be. The coastal agency, the CRMC, Coastal Resources Management Council, actually established an urban greenways program. So anytime there's a redevelopment or new development along the shoreline of, think East Providence, Cranston, Warwick, the developer has to make room for public access to the shore. They can't block it. More recently, we've partnered with the Washington Park Improvement Association and South Providence Neighborhood Association to put our elbows up and get public access at the bottom of Public Street, which is right in the middle of our dirty port on Allen's Avenue. And many people said, like, why do you want to have access to there? Well, it's a nice place to be by the water. If you live in that neighborhood, you should be able to walk right down and enjoy yourself and do whatever you want with your family, go fishing, or just enjoy the peace of mind that comes with looking at the water. So that's a recent victory. So all that's great, but I want to now kind of, everything that Sharon Lewis was saying was really resonating with me. So tell you what, she described sacrifice zone. I would say the area, the South Side and Allen's Avenue is a sacrifice zone. There's no question about it. If you think about, I know many of you have probably seen piles of scrap from the road, mountains of it actually, but think about, as the rest of the bay has been cleaned up, think about what exists next to the Port of Providence and in the Port of Providence. And there are scrap yards. There is an asphalt plant right off Allen's Avenue, right next to the South Side. There is fossil fuel infrastructure, oil, liquid natural gas, propane facilities. There used to be, until Sharon Lewis's good work, there used to be piles of coal that came into the Port of Providence that were destined for that Bridgeport power plant. So Sharon, thank you for doing what you did in Bridgeport. There's a wastewater treatment plant. There are idling diesel trucks at the port. There is Route 95 cutting right through the south side of Providence. And it's a community with asthma rates that are the highest in the state, living in homes with lead pipes that are poisoning our children. And it is a place where climate change poses a huge risk in many ways. If we had a 1938 hurricane type event, what would happen to all those facilities that are managing, storing, shipping in and out all these fossil fuel, these different types of fossil fuel? The other thing that's happened, which over time that you probably don't see or don't think about too much, the state's commitment to environmental enforcement has plummeted over the last decade to 2 decades. So there used to be basically an environmental strike force that would, and they were former cops. But they sort of banded together and formed this unit within the Department of Environmental Management to go out to the worst places and attack the worst problems in a really committed way. That strike force, I'm just using that term loosely, but that's down to one person now. And I think politically, the state has lost the will to enforce environmental laws. And that is felt most severely in places like the South Side, Port of Providence area. So that is a big challenge, a big development that is that we all need to work to deal with together. While the rest of the Bay got cleaned up, other industries did indeed gravitate towards Allen's Avenue. So over the years, there have been proposals to build things like a sewage sludge incinerator next to the sewage treatment plant. So again, neighborhood groups, Save the Bay, others fought that back. I will tell you, Rhode Islanders, as an aside too, that was actually, we think, part of a kind of a crooked deal that a very powerful person was trying to ram through. So here we are with the Bay getting cleaned up, urban waters getting cleaned up, access to urban waters growing. At Save the Bay site, we relocated down to Fields Point on the Johnson & Wales campus in 2005. Part of the reason to do that was to open up a gateway to Narragansett Bay for the community. And so anyone can come to our site, walk the shore, sit outside, bring their families, go fishing from the shore. And I invite all of you to come down and see it sometime. And if you go during the summer, especially in late afternoon, you will see people from the South Side walking, biking, driving down there to go fishing, and also just get the I guess the spiritual and the soul filling beauty of Narragansett Bay to renourish you, you know. But that's for everyone. That's for the community. So there are things that need to be done now. Some things are being done now. The environmental justice movement is taking off in Rhode Island. I wish we had an organization as organized and powerful as what Sharon Lewis described. And I hope we can get there, because I think we need that badly. In the meantime, the traditional, you know, the traditional white, really white-led, white populated groups are having to do a lot of introspection and start to expand their membership and open up our doors and be much more inclusive than we've been in the past. And we're all doing that to different degrees. The Environment Council of Rhode Island, which has been around for at least 40 years, has actually reset its direction to really be a platform for environmental justice in Rhode Island, which is a very, very important move, I think. There are laws underway that or bills underway that are being considered right now. We too have an Environmental Justice Act, but it's a bill. It's not a law yet. So we're way behind Connecticut that way. That bill deals with something that was talked about earlier, and that's cumulative impacts. So under the law right now, if an incinerator company wants to build an incinerator at Fields Point, or along Allen's Avenue in the port, that permit would be considered just on its own. In other words, how much pollution is it emitting? Who is it going to impact, et cetera? But that's not fair, and that's not right, because the people who live in the neighborhoods closest to the port are already experiencing and suffering from the effects of all these other activities that are going on. So the Environmental Justice Act does two things. It requires an analysis of the cumulative impacts that are being felt in the area, the impact of an additional source of pollution, but it also sets up a much more robust community involvement process and gives people a seat at the table to really understand what's going on. I wish we had that act in place right now in law rather than just as a bill, because, for example, right now, the company C3 that owns a liquid propane facility is proposing to expand their facility and bring in more product by train, and those trains run through South Side neighborhoods. So we're fortunate in that our Energy Facilities Siting Board has they sort of denied this company the right just to go ahead and build, and they're requiring a much more rigorous environmental review and public health review of potential impacts. So that's a good development too. Excuse me. I think a lot of what environmental justice is about respect, and is about taking on the institutional racism that exists. The agencies that make decisions that impact people's lives do not include, nor do they take into enough account the people whose lives are impacted by their decisions. So that's everything from the DEM to the Coastal Resources Management Council to the Energy Facility Siting Board. I could go on too. I think there is the beginnings of a growing call to right some of these wrongs and change some of the structures in our state. I believe personally that environmental justice is largely about respect and equality and inclusion and voices at the table. I think when we really have true environmental justice, we will have more prosperity for all, and we will have more peace for all. I'm just trying to tie in the whole theme of the organizations and what you're doing. So environmental justice is all those things. Groups like Save the Bay are digging in and making a finally, after years of what I would call well-intentioned but unsuccessful attempts to be more inclusive ourselves in terms of who's on our staff and who's on our board and how we make decisions and how we think about things. So, and we're all sort of in different stages of those processes. And I can tell you as a staffer, I'm very pleased that we're doing that, and we're setting up structures to hold ourselves accountable to achieving those goals internally as well. And we're getting guidance from people outside the organization. And just the process of doing that, I think, makes us all feel more whole and better about our work. It's a long, tough process, but it's a good process and a necessary process. So I guess my time is about up, but I would say a lot of progress has been made in terms of cleaning up waters of the communities that are most impacted by pollution. Progress is being made on expanding access to these waters for everyone, but there is still a ton of work to be done in terms of dealing with the institutional racism that we have in our state and in our institutions, in terms of passing laws that truly respect people and bring people to the table as equal players. And I think many of us here in Rhode Island are excited about the progress, and we just want to build on it now. We're building relationships with groups that we didn't have relationships with before. Those are tough, uncomfortable processes for many folks, but we can't get to where we all need to go without doing that. So I just want to wrap up now by thanking you all for convening and having these conversations. Preparing for an event like this is actually good for folks of us in the field, because it gets our wheels turning and gets us to dig deep and think, not just as an advocate, but as a human being about our communities and how we all need to pull together to make things right for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Topher. I believe there were a couple of questions for you in the chat. If you don't mind, I just want to
Sure.
review the chat. I think Sarah Jane Lepp had asked, do you know who sponsored the bill? And it looks like Pat found a link to the bill. Is that right? And the sponsors there are listed to the bill that you mentioned. My comment just has to deal more with the EPA, and because you also brought it up, which is sort of a broader definition or a defined definition of what environmental justice is.
Mm-hmm.
And that it always starts off with the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of, and then you fill in those race, color, national origin, income, without respect to development, implementation, or enforcement of those laws. So I know that you start adding those things to it. So I'm glad that you kind of touched upon that, and the fact that there's some things that are missing within that definition. And I think in order to make it equitable and fair and applied equitably and effectively to all communities and not just certain communities. So thank you for mentioning that and commenting on that as well. I appreciate that. Questions, comments, anything in regards to what you just heard?
Well, I'm going to have something to say, right?
Jane Eastman is going to have something to say. Jane, absolutely.
Always does. First, I want to say that I've been to the Save the Bay facility for events, and this is a little sidebar. They host events. You can have a wedding, you can have a graduation party, you can have this and that. It's a very lovely spot just to go and have that kind of thing. But also, my question is, do you recruit volunteers to fight for these bills that will become laws, or even to work at the facility? And do you have any volunteer positions open that anybody that's watching today might be interested in filling?
Oh yeah, I think of volunteerism as sort of like the lifeblood of Save the Bay.
Okay.
So on the sort of advocacy front, we have a sort of an action network, and we use a platform called Voter Voice. So if you sign up to be a part of that, you would be alerted to the introduction and the process of certain sort of priority pieces of legislation. So for instance, when the Environmental Justice Act comes up for a vote in the House, hopefully it will, you would be alerted, and we make it very easy for you to contact your senator and rep. And so we've just instituted that in the last couple of years. People can do all number of things. Someone mentioned cleanups earlier today and how foul the shores of the Blackstone were. We have thousands of people, individuals, companies, schools, community groups participating in shoreline cleanups every year. And I too get frustrated by, cleaning up a place one day and going back, not even a year later, but a month later, and seeing it fouled again. So anyway, but there are a huge range of opportunities for internships, volunteerism, and activism at Save the Bay.
So how would a person become part of that? Do they call you? Do they email? They go on a website?
So we do, the website is Save Bay, not Save the Bay, savebay.org. And we have there's a whole page on volunteer and internship opportunities. Yours truly started as an intern, a volunteer and intern at Save the Bay right after my Peace Corps experience. And I kind of worked my way into a job. So anything's possible. I just want to mention about the legislation. Someone put up the Senate version there's a Senate version and a House version of the Environmental Justice Act. The House sponsor is Representative Alzate, who is chair of the Black and Latino caucus in the House. And the Senate bill is sponsored by Senator Dawn Oyer, who's from Newport and the chair of the Environment and Agriculture Committee in the Senate. That bill has passed I think it's passed the full Senate now. The House is still sitting on it. And that's where we need a real big push.
Excellent. Topher, there's a question for you from Terry. Terry states he's concerned about the salvage yard on Allens Ave. He mentions that the city of Providence has been fined repeatedly for its toxicity. And the company apparently doesn't pay its fine. And wondering what your thoughts about effective action that can be taken on that particular situation.
So there are 3 scrap yards in the port. One, there's the one that's most visible to everyone is the one with the mountains of scrap that's being processed for recycling and then shipped out. So scrap is brought in, it's chewed up, and then loaded onto ships and sent to China, where it is recycled and then blended into the steel that China produces and then sells to the rest of the world. There's that one, and then there's something called Rhode Island Recycled Metals, which is at the bottom of Thurber's Avenue curve, and that I'm not sure if Terry's thinking about that one. Less, you don't see mountains of scrap, you see piles of it, but this is an example of how environmental enforcement has really fallen off in Rhode Island. So a decade ago, we saw what was going on at Rhode Island Recycled Metals. And what they were doing was they were taking appliances, automobiles, all the throwaway junk of society, and they had no permit to do what they were doing. You have to have a permit that requires you to manage runoff. So without certain infrastructure in place, all the toxics that are in these materials that are being grinded up find their way into the Providence River when it rains. And so there they are crushing automobiles into the mud and electronics, appliances. And for the longest time, we were banging on the DEM to go inspect and hold them accountable for breaking the law and require them to set up to do the work they need to get the permits to operate in a much more environmentally friendly way. And we had to go to the press and name and shame DEM to even taking action. They just, for whatever reason, they didn't act, and they become averse to these the things that I think are controversial, or maybe certain companies are supported by certain people in power in Rhode Island. That goes on too, of course. So we finally got DEM to inspect, and ultimately it took the Attorney General's office, though, to come in, their environmental unit, to come in and press charges against the company. That company has now been working under a court order to clean up, but for some reason the court order is not being enforced. And this is, I think that we are getting close to raising a big stink about it again. So they've not been required yet to install stormwater control infrastructure. They just continue to do what they're doing, and they're making money hand over foot. And frankly, we're at the end of our rope on this. So I still don't understand why the judge and the special master haven't really come down hard on this company. So they're making money, continuing to pollute, and they're not being held accountable enough. And I'm just frustrated as all get out. And they don't, I think the way they operate is probably not healthy for their workers either, by the way. While I'm mentioning that, I should also mention something that's also an encouraging development. There has been formed, not by Save the Bay is not a member of this, at least not yet, but there's something that's a new coalition has formed, and that's the Environment Jobs Coalition, in which environmental groups and organized labor are starting to work together on some issues of concern, including the building of facilities, that are carbon neutral, things like that. Rebuilding Rhode Island in a way that doesn't poison people, those kinds of things. So that's a good development too.
I had to mute myself on that one in a way that doesn't poison people. Yeah, exactly. Topher, thank you so very much. You've been very informative, and thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. We appreciate the work that you do at Save the Bay, and we appreciate you taking your time and joining us this morning. So thank you so very much. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And feel free to contact. I know you have my contact in. Actually, do I have time to put it in the?
Absolutely. Please do.
Yeah, okay,
Please
I'll do that.
Please
Thank
stick it
you.
in the. And Jane Eastman will be down with a busload of people to volunteer. Jane, get right on that so you can help them out over at Save the Bay. She'll probably be driving the bus if you let her. So ambitious, very ambitious, and she gets work done. Absolutely. So thank you so much.
You.
I'd like to just turn it over for a few minutes. You know, one of the best things about being able to do Speak Peace and coordinating with other supporters is the help that the Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies at the University of Rhode Island has given to us over the last couple of years. We've been fortunate, as this is our 4th annual, to have 2 of our Speak Pieces on the ground live at Beneficent Congregational Church, and having staff and students from URI come over and join us. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tendar, and he has just a few words. So Dr. Tendar, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Brenda, and the Justice and Witness Committee of Beneficent Church, as well as the wonderful speakers and participants. It's always, as always, wonderful to meet you. And I would like to share with you briefly about the Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies at the University of Rhode Island. And so as many of you might know, the Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies here organizes different talks and events related to peace, inner peace, mindfulness, and also we offer like training workshops and classes on campus, minor in nonviolence and peace, as well as our workshops on human rights and for well-being of all. And also we have started to recognize and award our students as well as faculty and staff members who contribute to nonviolence and peace through their research, teaching, outreach, as well as services. And also we try to focus on nonviolence trainer of the month from different countries. For example, for this month, we have nonviolence trainer of the month award recipient from Amani Mataboro from Democratic Republic of Congo. And so we have wonderful nonviolence trainers throughout the world. And so we invite you all to visit the center page. And also if you are able to join our International Nonviolence Summer Institute that is being offered in June. So if I may, I will share with you the flyer here on the chat. And I just shared a flyer on our another upcoming event that is related to affordable housing in Rhode Island on May 12th and 13th. May 12th would be online. May 13th will be on campus, and we have wonderful panel participants and speakers, including our state politicians and activists and so on. So please feel free to join if you are able. And again, we are so grateful for what you all have been doing and interested to promote nonviolence, peace, justice, and equality for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Tendar. It's always a pleasure having you. And I see that Paul has also been a part of our day today. So thank you two very much, as always, for your help and your support. And I hope, Paul, that you are enjoying your retirement. One of the things that I said we were going to do today is give away some prizes as well. I still have 2 more. So if you folks don't mind, and then we're going to go to a message and song. That's a reminder for all of us as well. Please also make sure that you check the chat for anything that you'd like to download, any other information that you would find helpful in the work that you do. So I'm just going to share a screen, and what I'm going to give away is we have, let me see, in celebration of the 150th anniversary of Arbor Day, and I think Jane Eastman mentioned that earlier, we have gift membership to the Arbor Day Foundation. So this again is a gift that will help plant trees and forests and communities where they're needed the most. So let me just share screen so that we can figure out who the winner of that gift will be. We got our dove in the middle. And that is going to go to Karina Martin. Congratulations. Congratulations. Obviously, looking to ensure a better future for people and the planet. Plant a tree. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I get to do the last gift, which is, I think in our conversation today, we mentioned some of the waste. I think when Sharon Lewis was speaking, she mentioned the waste. Where does it go? And a lot of the waste has to deal with plastics, plastic bottles. So we have a Kindness Matters doubled wall glass water bottle, which will replace the plastic bottle that you have. So let's see who our winner would be of this raffle prize. As we spin, I know you're all going, pick me, pick me, pick me. And that would be Grace. Congratulations, Grace, on your win of the Kindness Matters water bottle. Congratulations. One of the things that happens in terms of, putting together, this program is there was a piece that was done. I'm going to ask Pat to play it just to get us thinking about, again, this whole topic of peace, peace in our environment, peace in the work that we do, peace in our climate, but also peace within and mindfulness. So Pat.
Jane has her mic muted.
Thank you.
With earth as our mother, family all are we. Let me walk with my family in perfect harmony.
That was Jason Collier. We commissioned that song for Speak Peace. And let it begin with me. Let it begin with all of us. We can't do this program and get to our 4th annual without the support of individuals such as yourself, for attending. I want to say thank you to all of you for attending today. I want to say thank you especially to our speakers, Dr. Torres, Sharon Lewis, and Topher Hamblett. Thank you to Colin for being here, also walking us through that mindfulness section. Colin, I've been told several times in the chat and also on my cell phone that folks fell asleep, but they woke up, Colin. So thank you so much for centering and for putting people in that place where they can be reflective and they can be mindful of self and mindful that we do need inner peace and we do need to be mindful of others. So thank you so much for being here and for doing that for us. I also want to say a special thank you to URI's Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies. Without their support, without their help, again, we couldn't possibly put this program together and have some of the exciting things that we've been able to achieve today. I'd like to say a special thank you to my committee. I have a working committee that I've had for 5 years, folks, and they are a group of dedicated folks from Beneficent Congregational Church who do whatever I ask them to do. I'm still working on them cleaning my house out a little bit. They're getting there, but in terms of just being just such a wonderful group to work with, I couldn't ask for a better group of people, from Jane Eastman and Jane Hool, who join us tonight or join us this afternoon or this morning, Brenda. I've got Carlos Vega, Richard Bradley, Joyce Drake, and Amy Archibald. I can't say enough to you guys. Thank you so much for your support and for actually putting up with me most of those meetings. So thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Pat Falcon has always been a trooper. I want to say thank you to you, Pat, for your work and for your Zoom bombing detection earlier this morning. And I also want to say a special thank you to Carol Cutler, who has always been there to help out and to turn left and turn right whenever she is needed. So I also appreciate her and the help that she often gives to me in support. So I want to say thank you to her. I just want to know, first and foremost, if there's one word or 2 words or maybe even 3 words that summarizes your experience today, feel free to put it in chat or feel free to unmute yourself and let us know what that might be. If there's anything, any comments, I see some in chat. I see appreciation and words of encouragement. Enjoyed the program, enjoyed myself, fabulous program. Thank you very much. So I truly appreciate that. I don't know if there's any other words of encouragement or anything that anybody would want to say. I want to make sure that I don't squander away that opportunity. I will tell you that there is the Environmental Voter Project, which is a project that, and maybe I can put that in chat as well. If you'd like to go out and participate or donate time, talent, and money, it always works to get folks out to the voting polls and getting registered to vote in various different neighborhoods and areas. So I'll stop talking to see if there's anything else.
Well, Brenda, without you, this thing would not exist at all. It was your brainchild. It's your labor of love. And we enjoy working with you to support you while you put it all together, essentially. And I say we make Pat Falcon an honorary member of Justice and Witness.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jane. To all of you, thank you so much. You had a choice today and this morning, and I'm so very thankful that you chose us. So now move forward, go outside, get some of that sunshine on your face. Vitamin D is always helpful. But get some of that sunshine on your face and continue to take care of the gift that we've been given, which is the gift of our Mother Earth. So folks, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brenda. It was amazing.
Hi, Sarah Jane Lapp. How are you?
That was awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all of your help as always. You know, I can just text you in a minute and you always have an answer. You're just tremendous. We love you.
Hope to see you all in person one day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm leaving
Yes.
here, Brenda, and going to the Water Fire Center with my sister.